On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Chris Majka. He is the staff VP of BI at FM Global. We're going to be talking about data, stakeholders, how you onboard people to make them a valuable part of the team. Chris, I'm excited to have you on the show. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So before we start, let's get two pieces of information out of the way. Tell everyone what FM Global does and what are some of your responsibilities there?
Yeah, sure. So FM Global is a commercial property insurer. We have clients, all across the world. And at FM Global, I'm the staff VP of Business Intelligence, as you mentioned. So I help manage the day-to-day operations of the BI team.
Well, I'm sure you do a lot of work with stakeholders within the data space, getting people up to speed once you onboard them. I'm sure we got a bunch of stuff to dive into. Maybe let's start off just understanding what your team looks like. Just BI covers a lot of things, touches a lot of different things at different companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we have a team of 10 analysts, myself and another manager that manage the team. And we have everyone from, junior analyst all the way up to senior analyst and everything in between. So we have a really great mix on the team.
Gotcha. And when it comes to actually getting involved with stakeholders and the conversation, how is the team? What's the team model set up as? Is it more embedded? Is it hub and spoke? How do you guys approach delivery?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we have a centralized data analytics team. The BI team is a part of that, and we also have a advanced analytics team. We have a technology team and so forth. And so we work with the business in the sense that they have questions that they need answered and that they can't necessarily get at. So they come to us to help pull that information together for them.
Awesome. I guess when it comes to stakeholder discussions, does your team handle that individually? As a senior person do that and then disseminates information? How do you guys actually approach hey, we're going to sit down and talk to stakeholders and start driving requirements?
Yeah, so once they come to us with a problem, we'll set up an initial meet and greet with that team. Really try to understand, what are those questions that you're trying to answer with this data, right? I always say to my team, anybody can design a dashboard or a report, but if it's not answering the questions of the business, then it's sort of a waste of everybody's time. So what we really try to do is understand, what are those questions that the business is trying to answer, and then go from there.
When you are, I guess, onboarding is a big component to things as well. And when you do bring somebody on and you want to have them be a productive member, you got 10 people, get to the 11th, you don't want to be a complete drag on the other team members. How do you help facilitate onboarding to make it to be the least impact on your team?
Yeah, I think it starts with developing a sort of a talent pipeline, right? So managing teams is hard and leading teams is hard, right? It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of humility and introspection, but, always thinking about developing that talent pipeline. What are ways that you can sort of grow your network to always have, some options if you need it, right? And so one of those things is sort of taking part in internship programs or co-op programs. It's a great way to sort of build your network, understand that, you can begin to develop that sort of talent pipeline, working with these folks. And, so that's one of the ways that we can start to think about it. And then, once you do have an opening and you bring somebody on board, it's sort of pairing them up with a peer buddy, perhaps on the team, a senior member of the team that can really help them learn the business. And again, that goes back to, understanding the business is, I would say, 75% of, what a BI analyst does or what a data analyst does, right? And then it's also sort of simplifying things for that onboarding process. So, one of the things that, funny enough, one of our interns pointed out to us was the onboarding program that we had in place was very overwhelming for them. And that's not something that we had really put a whole lot of thought into in the past. But once they said that to us, we kind of said, yeah, you know what, we should probably go back and think about that a lot more. And so we did that, and we sort of simplified and streamlined the onboarding process itself. So now we have a document that's embedded in Teams. We use Microsoft Teams at FM. And, so that document from day one will kind of walk them through the process. And these are some of the things that you need to know. These are your teammates. They're all here to help. These are the folks that you can reach out to. And then one other thing we did was we created a section on that document called Team Stories. So each one of the team members will fill out a Team Stories sheet. And it's really just things like, these are all the things about me. This is where I grew up. This is what I like to do. Really getting the new team member some information on those folks on the team. Even, like I said, right from day one, right from the get-go, they can start to read up on their team and try to understand the folks that they're working with,
I guess that's actually, documentation and helping onboarding. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if it's, stuff that could be easily captured and disseminated. As you kind of have maybe seen some of the experiences of the process of providing this documentation, has that spread to other activities, other aspects of the workflow?
Yeah, documentation it's one of those things that nobody really likes to do, but it's really, really important in this particular line of work, right? Even things like, you think about a data dictionary or a data catalog, right? That's all so important and helps new team members get up to speed faster. And it's one of those things that you just, you don't really think too much about, but it is so important. And so it definitely spreads out into other areas of the business. And even with, peer review and things like that. So yeah, it definitely helps.
I guess from the standpoint of somebody joining the team to feeling comfortable in front of a stakeholder, what's the typical timeline? Obviously, understanding what the business does is crucial here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, why this is the case, but you kind of break it out into sort of 30, 60, 90 days, and that sort of thing. But the one thing I don't want to do, or we don't want to do, is really just kind of throw them into the fire or throw them to the wolves, right? We want to have a process in place that can help them succeed. I always tell my team, one of my number one jobs as a manager and as a leader is to help them succeed. Right. So if they're not succeeding, then I feel like I'm not succeeding either. And so, yeah, we try to pair them up and sort of, give them projects or work that will kind of ease them into it. So they're acting as a supporting analyst for a while and, sort of learning from some of the more senior analysts on the team as time goes on. We'll start to shift that over a little bit so they can take more of the lead on projects.
I guess you mentioned the intern, provided some feedback, and obviously the team incorporated, made adjustments. I recorded an episode on my other podcast about talent creating feedback loops efficiently. You just got me thinking in terms of how feedback integrates into your team, because obviously it does help with onboarding with stakeholders, but just the team itself and how it operates with feedback. Do you guys have specific processes? Is it more ad hoc?
It's a little more ad hoc. I certainly encourage the team to collaborate as much as possible with each other. We try to assign projects in a way that does allow them to collaborate, and so they can gather feedback that way from each other. And then, certainly different activities, we'll try to have throughout the year, but also, our regular team meetings, this is their time. It's their time to talk about projects or techniques or things they might be working on with the rest of the team. We're always so busy and we're focused on our work, but having this time set aside each couple of weeks just to kind of get together and talk about, work that we're doing, I think provides a good vehicle for that feedback.
Yeah, because it was interesting. We were talking about how feedback on its own is obviously integral. And I think a lot of times we're talking about how teams, provide feedback, and then there isn't something to follow up to actually give them the direction is correct or not correct, right? So go do this, you can improve on that. But if somebody doesn't actually know what that is, or if the direction is heading the right direction, they're kind of left guessing if they're modeling the right behavior, or did they just get lucky? And I think it was kind of interesting because I started thinking about my own personal life and how I absorb feedback. And sometimes you're like, well, did I do this right? And you're like, well, maybe I did. I'll do it again. And my wife always says, like, can you make that meal again the same way? I'm like, maybe. You didn't tell me if it was good the one other time before. So now I'm guessing what I changed between the last three. And, it's interesting because that feedback component becomes pretty, I think, important. I think the example you provided, the intern and documentation, was interesting because your team was able to take that, improve the whole process for everyone. And that was an interesting observation that they brought to the table. And without that, obviously, I don't know how things were before, but I think that's those things happen so often that we don't really ever pay attention to them.
Yeah, and I think it's about providing sort of that environment, so that they feel comfortable coming to you with ideas and feedback and things like that. You want to try and encourage that with the team. And, I think it's also important that they feel ownership in what they're doing, right? In the work they're doing. They want to feel like, what they're doing matters, and what their opinion is matters. So you try and provide as much of an environment to support that you can.
I guess when it comes to stakeholders, and sometimes you have some challenging stakeholders, or you have requirements that are a little bit more difficult, and you have to kind of help prioritize. When do you jump into that conversation? When is it need to get to you versus, hey, I'm going to let the team handle this as long as they can?
Yeah, so I think one of my philosophies is not to micromanage. So I try to sort of step back and be a guide as much as possible, right? And so I'm observing. I'm trying to let them lead the project, and come to me when they have questions or when they need me to step in. But so I'm always looking at timelines, progress, things of that nature, and that is part of my job, is to sort of act as a buffer with the larger business. So if they need to shuffle things around to reprioritize, that's part of my job, is to jump in and speak with the business and just let them know, we're working on your request or your project, but this is a realistic timeline, and these are the reasons why, right?
And when you mention, I guess, prioritization, obviously when you're talking to multiple, if you have 10 plus people on your team, multiple projects, multiple stakeholders, everyone typically likes to think that their problem needs attention first, and foremost. That's their world, obviously. How do you prioritize, or how does the team prioritize, or how do you work with the team to help prioritize work that's coming in and making sure stakeholders are aware of other activities and where their project might fit just within the scope of the delivery cycle?
Yeah, I think it is really important to sort of prioritize and set expectations from the get-go with your customer, right? And I think part of that is having a process to do that. So we have, an intake form on our intranet site for our data analytics, right? And it says, if you're a business or an end user, you need some data from us, you go to our intranet page, you click on the link that says it's a data analytics request form, right? And you fill out the information that gets routed to my team, and then we'll take a look at it and sort of evaluate it and assign it out to the proper analyst, depending on subject matter, workload for the analyst and that sort of thing. But again, part of that is setting proper expectations up front with the business.
As you're in data and technology shifts kind of trickle down into BI tools, you're always having to take a look at what other stakeholders might be hearing, especially when it comes to AI and machine learning, and can you do this, can you do that? What's a component of your job in terms of making sure that the stakeholders are educated in terms of what you guys can realistically deliver? Because obviously, half the world realizes ChatGPT can do a lot of things, but obviously, it can't do a lot of things that they probably want. It probably helps them on their day to day if they want to pop on or pop off. But how is that starting to impact you when you deal with stakeholders, or does it at all?
Yeah, certainly, especially when you're talking with stakeholders and they say, they might hear something out in the news or something like that and talk about it. But, I think part of it is really just having a relationship with the stakeholders and talking with them. And always, one thing that I like to do is we have user groups set up across the company. So one is for, we use Power BI for our visualization software. We have a Power BI user group. Right. And that's a lot of that's for the developers and the creators of the reports. But then we also want to look into, who are those consumers of these reports across the company? They need help with education too and learning how to use the tool. So we're doing demos with them. We're showing them how to use the tool, things of that nature. So I think that'll help. But, you mentioned ChatGPT, and that's certainly going to have an effect on business. I think it's just a matter of how it has an effect on it and how you can sort of pivot to take advantage of it. So we'll see.
It kind of leads me to a question I'm asking leaders, because I think it's an interesting component of the job. I mean, you're a technologist. Every technologist, or most technologists I've ever met, are always interested in learning what's new and what's coming out. And I guess the technology FOMO side, the fear of missing out of, is there a better tool? Is there something else I could bring in? Could have benefits, could have costs. And I guess that's a critical component of the job of evaluating, emerging tools, upcoming tools, the impact to the team. How do you deal with the technology FOMO? And not that you have FOMO, but just as a general, fact that you're bombarded with new technologies all the time.
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And I always, I'm one of those people that I love learning new technologies. I love seeing what's out there. I always encourage my team to try new things. Yes, we use SQL. Yes, we use Excel. We use Power BI. But hey, if you really like using Python, let's go for it and try it out. So I definitely encourage them to do that. I think at the end of the day, though, they're all tools, right? So they're all tools to help you solve a problem or answer a question that the business has. But I think, if you don't step back and sort of put yourself in the end user's shoes, sort of having that empathy, understanding where they're coming from, what they're trying to do, it doesn't really matter what tool you're going to use, right? I think at the end of the day, the important part is really helping them answer questions about their business that they have.
Well, I like that. I think it's a very practical way of viewing, the benefits and the impacts of tools. Otherwise, I'm sure your team would be driven crazy if you replatformed too frequently, because obviously they leave question marks. So what happens to me and my skill set when that happens? And that's never good for team morale. Chris, I was going to say, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing. I think it was really interesting kind of hear your thoughts on, especially stakeholders and really getting into them and understanding them and having your team deliver.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a pleasure, Amir.
Absolutely. I guess what's a good way of somebody getting a hold of you if somebody wants to reach out, pick your brain on anything you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So I am active on Twitter in the business intelligence community. So they can find me there, and then also on LinkedIn. So I can give you those links if you need it. Maybe you can put it on the website.
Absolutely. We'll include them in the show notes. Thank you again for being on.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. That's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, if you found the episode interesting, please share it with somebody else who might. That's how the podcast grows. If you can leave a review and subscribe to the podcast, I'd appreciate that very much. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.